In that first reading, we heard about an older man and a younger man, both in the temple, where they were charged to be there. One was more the priest that knew about the temple, and the other was in the process of learning about it. And it was evening, it was night, and they both fell asleep. But the young man, as you remember, keeps hearing a voice calling him by name, and he immediately goes back to Eli and says, "Did you call me?" "No, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." And that's repeated over and over until this wise Eli realized something's going on here. And he says to Samuel, when he comes the third time, he says, "When this happens again, just say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" I'm going to give you an update on that story about another older man and younger man. It took place a little over 50 years ago, so for some of you, it was long before you were thought of, okay? But it was about a high school student who was in his senior year of high school, drawing close to the end of the semester, and he was on a retreat. Imagine, he was on a retreat with his classmates. And he knew somewhere on those days, the principal, the administrator, who was a priest, we'll call him Eli, he was always bugging this guy about becoming a priest. And the young man was getting tired of hearing it, saying, "Don't talk to me about that." But to himself, he had to admit that when he was in grade school, he thought a lot about becoming a priest. And when he was young, his parents told him, he would pull down the oven door on the oven and set it up as an altar. And then put on vestments that his non-Catholic grandmother made for him. So he had to admit to himself. But now he's in high school. He's in a co-ed high school. And by junior year, he had developed an interest in one of the girls. And they dated quite often. But now he's on retreat. And there's that priest who's going to come to him again. And finally, the young man saw the light. It was a flashlight. And the priest, for some reason, maybe it was sitting there and he was just looking for something to play with or something, and he takes the flashlight and he's bouncing it off the ceiling, trying to be very casual. He says to the young man, "So, you're going to the seminary?" "Don't ask me that, Father. I'm tired of dealing with that." Now, the young man at this point had not a clue what he wanted to be when he grew up. He didn't know what college to go to. In those days, you could take your time. And so finally, he said to him, "I want you to answer the question. Do you want to go to the seminary or not? I think God may be calling you." And the young man, Samuel, said, "Okay, I'll give it a try." "Oh, no," said Eli. "You don't give this a try. Do you want to go or don't you?" "Well, okay, I'll go." Finally. In those days, a boy like that could be congratulated for making that decision, believe it or not. Doesn't happen that way anymore. This young man knows that because before he left for seminary, they still had the prom and the trip to the Admiral boat on the river, and he was with his date. And all these guys I used to see run off to the east, over on the east side to get beer. Yeah, they did it then too. And they would gather around the table where he and his date were sitting. They say, "Hey, we just heard you go to the seminary. Congratulations, we're all behind you." And I thought, could you guys move out of the way? Just get away. But he went. And he began to enjoy it. And every summer when they had time off, he would come home and see his family, and he would visit that same girl, just to say hello, of course. finding out she's not taken yet. Okay. But by the fourth year, he went again to see her, but now he was getting ready to go into university, into the theology university. And so he went to visit again. She was still available. They talked for a long time. They finally hugged and said goodbye, tears in each other's eyes, and he went back. One more visit with Samuel just to make sure. And Samuel said, no, continue to follow your path. Now, I'm not here today to talk to you about vocations. I'm not here to tell all of these young people, you really got to listen now, because we could have a lot of priests out here and a lot of sisters, and that's not what I want to say today. Speaking of sisters, by the way, religious women, do you know the Pope made this entire year, called it a tribute to, a prayer time for the religious sisters and brothers, the nuns, the brothers. We have a lot of those in this parish, but we don't know it all the time. Do we have any of our consecrated religious women in the community this morning? Oh, there's one, there's two, there's three. Oh my gosh, see, I told you we don't even know they're around. Could you please stand so we can see you? These ladies have taught me a lot. They've taught me a lot. And they've come out recently in favor by Rome, so that after a long time of anger and talking, they got a good bill of health, which I rejoice in. What I'm asking you to do today is to be this young Samuel and listen for God. But what are you going to hear? Where is this God? Where is this Christ? The disciples following him said, where do you live, Master? Where do you live? He says, come and see. And they say they went to that place, but they don't talk about that place. Some writers think what they really found out is that Jesus lived with the poor and with the outcast, with the tax collectors. That's where he was living. And St. Paul discovered it even more deeply when he said, Christ lives in me. Christ lives in you. Amazing. And that's why that one reading can say our bodies are made as temples of the Holy Spirit, for the Spirit lives within us. But how do we hear the voice? The voice comes disguised as your own heart, comes disguised as your own spirit, your own soul. It comes disguised as your gifts, your abilities, your talents. And in there somewhere, that mixture of the divine DNA and the human DNA mixed together, and you begin to go in a certain direction. The man who founded the Jesuits came up with his own experience of that. He was in the military, he got wounded, he was recovering, a long recovery. They gave him some books to read. Most of the books were about the people in the military. It was novels about the knights who went into battle with their swords and their shields, and he loved reading those. He couldn't put them down, but after a while he had read all of them, and he said, I need something else to read, and they handed him a book on the saints, Lives of the Saints. He read those and enjoyed those too. But here's what he discerned. Here's how his body worked. He realized that after reading about the knights and how excited he got, the excitement didn't last very long. But when he read about the saints, he found out the joy he had in that continued to linger. And now he knew where he was headed. And eventually he founded the Jesuits. What is your inner self telling you? What do we hear that say? And if you ever doubt, and I'm sure it's easy to doubt, that Christ dwells in you, remember what we're about to do. We're going to go to this table. We're going to take ordinary wine, ordinary bread, and say, this is my body, this is my blood. Now watch where that goes. As a first grader told us, it doesn't go into my stomach, it goes into my heart. And I realize that I am a temple of the presence of my God, as you are as well.